Okay, so hopefully this is we're live now, and I'm going to answer whatever questions that you have about Russia, Ukraine, history, policy, political, economic, military, whatever I can answer. If I feel like I understand a particular thing, I will try to answer it, and if I'm out of my depth, I will not try to answer it. Okay, what I'm going to do though is I asked a number of questions. I asked my community on my YouTube channel. It's just my name, Dr. Gerdes. I asked them for their feedback of what questions they might have. So just a couple days ago, I said, "What questions do you have now that we have blown past the 1 year mark in the war?" So I'm going to address those, and then if you in the community have any questions that you want to answer, I will divert and I will answer your questions before I answer the questions that were out there in my community channel. So the first question that I had here was, with all the RU losses in men and equipment, have you seen any articles that state how much longer Russia can maintain its ongoing disaster? I've recently seen a video that Russia is gearing up for a NATO confrontation. I simply don't believe that they can pull it off. Your thoughts? So anyone who tells you that they have a definitive answer is not trustworthy. Okay, so don't believe anybody that is telling you, yes, it's going to be X number of days until such and such happens and whatever. No, because there's too many variables. So one of the variables, for example, is can they, okay, if it's just Russia holding on, they can only hang out this long. But if they get North Korean supplies and Iranian supplies, and it just goes on, right? It depends on a number of factors. So if you're listening to somebody who says, and there's a market for this, right? People are making money by doing these predictive, and the worst ones, I think, are the ones where you're not actually seeing a person put up or shut up. Like if there's a person being interviewed or a person that's saying, this is what I have studied, this is what I see, I trust that a lot more than like an infographic kind of something, because they're making money because people are really interested in the particular subject. So do I see any articles stating how much longer Russia can maintain? Yes, but again, it's all depending on what happens. By the way, since a bunch of you have now joined me, if you have questions, I'll preempt the questions that I'm going over and answer your questions first. So let me scratch where you itch. Okay. Next question was, at this rate of attrition in both equipment and manpower, how long can Russians sustain these losses? Russia's taking terrible losses. I mean, this last week has been devastating for them with the number of tanks that they lost, for example. Actually, 2 weeks have been just brutal for them for losing tanks. But I don't know how long, for the same reason as the last question, because we don't know what else they're going to get from elsewhere. So assuming that China doesn't come to their aid, and China, that's a real potential wild card, and the US and other Western allies are working to kind of mitigate that, to keep that China from supplying them with these kind of things. Assuming China doesn't supply them with things, they're going to run out sooner than later. I saw the statistic and I had to write it down. And this was just in one of the articles that I was reading, that Ukrainians were spending 7,000 shells, like this is like munition, artillery shells per day. Russia was spending 50,000 artillery shells per day. Now you can only do some math, and you can only go on but so long. Now Russia has a lot more to start with, but over time the Ukrainians are getting more from the West. So as Russia expends at a higher rate, unless they can make that up, they're going to have a problem somewhere down the line. I think what they're trying to do is try to have a devastation where they can capture those. My This is not from an article. This is not something I can hang my hat on. My gut tells me they want to secure the four oblasts and then make it look like, see, the Ukrainians, they just want to prolong this war. We want peace. Somebody bring us help us bring peace. Trying to split the coalition so that they will not be able to uh, they'll not be able to continue, because the coalition fractures and won't have the arms to continue once the Russians are running low. That's just my gut feeling, but I could be wrong, and I'm telling you, I very well could be. Hello. So the dozen of you that are here, if you have a question, I'll answer your question first. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going through the questions that I posed on Dr. Gerdes on YouTube at YouTube or YouTube at dr.gerdes. Um, and when that pops up, I will redirect and answer your questions. Next question I had was, "Hi, European here. In May or June this year?" That's a good question. The winter has actually been very kind to Ukraine comparatively to what Russia thought. Russia thought the general winter was going to work in its favor, and it has made it somewhat more miserable, but it has not been as brutal as the Russians were hoping. And the Ukrainians have been able to circumvent things with the points of invincibility and things along those lines to keep people from freezing out in the cities and keeping them. Again, I think Russia's attacks on the generation stations were trying to get the people to turn against the government to say, no, we need to end this war. And I think that was just, um, I get what they were trying to do, but it didn't work out in any meaningful way. Okay, so will you start freezing in May or June? I think you'll start freezing in December, so it's going to be a while. But just didn't work out the way that they were asking. Mike Harden says your comments, thoughts on the India conference where Lavrov said Russia did not start the war. But that was so. I have been thinking about that. Thank you very much. Um, I've thought about that, and so he was laughed at, and that's breaking decor. But when you lie with impunity, as much as you have, the other delegates should be breaking decor. That is not okay for you to just boldly lie and say that, and they started this war, and right. And so I was really impressed. Um, that that's not like a coordinated kind of thing. It's a sentiment that just kind of spilled over because Russia, we know you're lying, right? I mean, think about the coalition. There's about 50 countries on the side of Ukraine that are saying, no, 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 this is not okay. This can't prevail. And then there's a handful, maybe a half dozen or so authoritarian nations that are with Russia, truly with Russia, like North Korea, like Iran, um, Venezuela. So those kinds of countries, Syria, but that's pretty much it. And then there's a small group of maybe 2 dozen or so, maybe a little bit more than 2 dozen, who just want to stay on the sideline and really don't want to get involved because they don't want to like India doesn't want to take sides. Many African countries, but that the delegates did what they did is a very positive sign, and you shouldn't be able to just get away with lying like that. Great question. Okay, next, a perspective on. Oh, did I answer the last one? What's European here? We already talked about that. When you start freezing. Next question: what is your opinion of Krasno UNC? You just had a long, fascinating interview with Ben Hodges, and I never heard of that channel before. Okay, so and that's a good question because you need to make sure you're looking at legitimate sources and finding legitimate sources. You can kind of go back into their playlist and see how long they've been doing things or who they're affiliated with or those kind of things. Um, so UNC, it's Krasno UNC. I've never heard of, but UNC, I went to the video and looked at it, and UNC is University of North Carolina, a legitimate source. They were interviewing Ben Hodges. They asked him intelligent questions and let him give his intelligent answers as he always does. So I had no issue with that particular video. I don't know what they might do otherwise, but again, UNC is a legitimate source. Okay, something about Moldova. Next question was something about Moldova and Transnistria. There's a lot of uprise brewing there. I don't know enough about it to be able to speak to it intelligently or to be able to say with any kind of knowledge that would be able to add anything meaningfully to the conversation. So because of that, I'm going to skip that question. To the 20 some odd of you that are here, if you want to leave a question, ask me the hardest questions that you really want. And if I can answer it, I'll answer it. If I can't, I'll do what I just did and say, just don't know. I'm sorry. I'm not worried about not being able to answer a question. I think that it's a fool's errand to think that, oh no, they might think I don't know something and then they'll go somewhere. I was disabused of that when I was at an economics conference at University of Virginia, and we heard James Buchanan. He's a Nobel Prize laureate in economics speak, and question after question, somebody would ask him something and say like, "Hmm, that's a good question. I don't know." And the next question, he was like, I haven't thought of that. I'd have to think about that some more. I don't know. And I'm thinking, like, you have a Nobel Prize in economics. Like, there's public choice theory is your theory, and that's right. And he was humble enough to say, I don't know. And so, if you don't know, just don't. You don't know. That's okay. Okay, next question. A perspective. Oh, something just popped up. Ozzy Bugga. At ML Harden, it showed me that the Indian intelligentsia who were there know Russia is lying. That's exactly right. They do know that they're lying. They don't want to align against them. They want their sweet oil revenue. They're getting a great deal with oil, but they don't want to. They don't want to tick off either side. They just want to stay out of it. India is a democracy. It was allied this way in a way with the USSR during the Cold War. Largely has a post-colonial legacy. Yeah, aligning with the British is hard for India given that they were colonized, right? And again, Russia goes out of its way when it's talking to India or talking to African nations to say, we never colonized in Africa. Well, yeah, because you were colonizing your neighbors. You never extended so far, but that's really what was going on there. But great observation, Ozzy. Okay, next question. Perspective on Ukrainian refusers and their reception in Ukrainian society and how Ukrainian leadership handles people that don't fit in the Heroyam Slava narrative. I'm not sure Ukrainian refusers. Does anybody can shed some light on what they're talking about with that? I'm not sure that I know about that. Okay, next question. Again, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer your questions. So please feel free to ask them. Has Russia found any U.S. bioweapons labs in Ukraine yet? Well, if they had, I'm sure that they would make a big deal of it, and they probably already have said that. I mean, I remember reading articles in RT about how U.S. has biolabs there, and they didn't actually have any definitive proof of anything. They didn't show me anything. So yeah, but they don't need any proof of anything to actually just go and write articles. It's really an amazing thing. Um, I would like to hear from you. What is it that's like your most burning question? Like, what is it that you really want to know right now? Just pop that into the chat box and let me hear from you because I want to try to address whatever you're interested in. Another person, why hasn't Ukraine deployed its combat mosquitoes yet? Yeah, there was a big thing about that some time ago. Combat mosquitoes were quite a discussion point at a time. It's really amazing what what they've been able to do technologically. Excuse me, what they've been able to do technologically, and Ukraine has been really cutting edge in what they've been able to do technologically. Another question was, is Europe at least freezing yet? Now, when you say these things, even tongue in cheek, what you're saying is you're showing that Russia's plans haven't worked. And I've been wondering about this. Like, at what point does Russia go, that didn't work, that didn't work, this didn't work, this other thing didn't work. Maybe this is just a bad plan. And I don't think they're ever going to admit that there's a bad plan because the alternative at this point is so awful for them that they can't admit anything. So that's just where we are. Okay, I really want to hear from you. I know that there's 20 some odd of you out there. Tell me what you have to say. So pop something into the chat so that I can address you because I'm near the end of my questions. So all right, something that just popped up. Gap in the current reticence of U.S. to supply F-16s related to diplomacy to keep China from supplying lethal aid to Russia. Okay, Gap said was talking about the reticence. The reticence has always been there because. So let me back up. Joe Biden got a black eye from some partisans in his own country for visiting Ukraine by saying things like, you should have been visiting these people in Ohio because there was this train wreck that had a toxic chemical spill, and you should have been there rather than here. And I have said consistently that is wrongheaded. He should have been dealing with Zelensky because this train toxic waste spill thing, it's bad and it's your people. We get that. You have people that can address that. But this isn't likely to kick off World War III if it's handled incorrectly. But Ukraine has the potential. And if you even widen the lens, Ukraine could be a smaller war within a larger potential brewing conflict. And the U.S. is aware of that with China. Like China's watching what's happening in Ukraine and thinking like, how's that going? Is this going to work? What happens if we try to take Taiwan? So it's got that kind of potential. But the hesitancy to give fighters is the same hesitancy to give tanks, which is the same hesitancy to give other weapons and drones and uh, other like javelins and other things along those lines. And each one was the Russians have been saying this is a red line. Don't cross this red line, or we're going to be at war with you too. The most recent iteration of this I talked about in the noodles episode, which I had fun with. That was a bunch of fun. Where Medvedev said that if you not only give these things, but then you train Ukrainians to use them, that's a red line. That means that we're de facto at a state of war with you. That's not. Well, what they're trying to do is they're trying to deter the U.S. from giving them. And so they have to thread a needle. And I've said this before. I've given Joe Biden high marks. I'm a Republican. I don't like Joe Biden on many of his policies, right? But I give him high marks for that. Okay. And by the way, people were like, how can you be a Republican and still support? You don't understand. Most Republicans are in this kind of camp. And there's a small, very vocal faction that's like, no, Ukraine shouldn't get anything. There's a small vocal faction. I should probably talk about that some more in another time. But and the analogy that I would give you is if I was a Republican who opposed FDR on domestic policies, I could still think Hitler's terrible, right? And still full-throatedly support FDR in stopping that oppression. Same. Okay. At any rate, I give Biden high marks on how he's handled the war so far. I think he's been a little bit too slow, but he's been trying not to leave any allies behind. He's got to deal with Germany and France that are a little slow to bring things to the table, where Poland and the Baltic states want to give it to him real quick. And I give him very poor marks for stopping this. I give all the presidents poor marks for stopping this, from Bush forward, Bush two, Junior, from him forward. I give all them bad marks for it. But yeah, he's been trying. He's been working at it. Okay. Anyway, next question. KB Trans says, can you please post a list of YouTube channels that you follow? Thanks so much. I really appreciate and enjoy postings. Okay, so there is on my channel something about like a number of those that I would look to. And you guys tell me who else should be on this kind of list. Let's just talk through this. So I would say the first one that got me going was Dennis Davdov. In fact, I think he's kind of my inspiration, where it's like, yeah, I should be doing this too. I mean, I can bring something to the table. Like I was watching him with the battle maps, and I'm not going to do the battle maps, but I see things as I've been reading through this that I'm not seeing in the perspective. So there's the battle map thing with Dennis Davdov. Ukraine, the 5-minute one with Valerie Zaluni on the cover. I can't remember the name of it. That one's awesome. They do a really great job. I want to say it's not Inside Ukraine. It's somebody help me. What's the name of that one? So that one's really good as well. I like a tippling philosopher. He does a good job covering things. I'm gonna be upsetting. Reporting from Ukraine. Thank you very much, Gap. Reporting from Ukraine is excellent and very, very concise. If you want broader, then you go to a tippling philosopher. You go to Georgie. You go to Dennis Davdov. If you want other news, you go to Jake Bro. Jake Bro does a really good job. And there's a number of them. Who else do you all watch? And let's hear from you. Who you think Arthur Ray is good. If I want perspective on Russia, I will go to Inside Russia, and I like Vlad and Inside Russia have a unique perspective about how the Russian mind works. So it just depends on what I'm wanting to understand to whom I go. And then I try to also go to new channels and find Mercator Media does. Yeah. So Mercator is like always these long 3-hour things I just can't get through. They do a good job with what they're doing. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's the the veteran reacts. He does a good job. Mick Dundee is not one. 1420. Yeah, Mick. Sorry, I thought Mick Dundee was your answer. That was the name of the person saying 1420. I was just watching 15 minutes before I started this, where they were asking them about, like, do you think we should go to Transnistria? And people, for the most part, they were starting to say, well, I don't know if that's a good idea. But the older they are, the more they're like, yes, we miss the Soviet days. Like, okay, you remember what the Soviet days were like. Yeah, Combat Vet Reacts is what I was talking about, ML. Enforcer is also a good, uh, I mean, they do a good job with what they do. So it depends on who you're trying to do. Ukraine Matters, Georgia. I already mentioned Ukraine Matters. Sorry. I mentioned Georgie. I didn't say the name Ukraine Matters, but these are all good channels. And this is actually a really productive conversation to have, because, like, as we're talking through this, we can talk about who's legit, and everyone that you mentioned here. Perun, awesome. Anna from Ukraine. Anna does a great job for what she does. She doesn't do the battle map. She gives you a Ukrainian sense of what's going on. With Anna, I would also add Orist. Orist I've had onto my show here, because I wanted to pull him into my video so that you could be exposed to what he does, because he does such a great job, like, giving you a sense of what that feels like on the ground. Perun does a great job, and really, it's long, but it's very sound. Enforcers like a televangelist show. Okay, so TCM clips, I have not watched personally. I can't speak to that, but everyone else on the list: Enforcer, Combat Vet Reacts, Ukraine Matters, Perun, Anna from Ukraine, I can say I've watched, and I'm sure go watch them. What I just posted on my community tab was, hey, let's crowdsource a list of when people go live, so that you can watch a running list of, when people are going live, so that you can see these things. And let's put them all in a standard Eastern Standard Time. That's Washington, D.C., New York time. And then we'll convert out a list in the spreadsheet about when that is. So as soon as we can crowdsource those answers, let's go do that. And then we can have a list so that other people can see it. And I'll publish it and make it available to everyone. Perun's, yeah, really good. Yulia, yes, I've seen Yulia some, and she strikes me as good. Now, there are some that I find very irritating. Like, I don't know if you've watched Ivan. What's the word, like, kicked out of your country? Something, I sanctioned Ivan, right? His is terrible. It's like all about him trying to say how bad his life is as he's getting into his Cadillac Escalade. I mean, I don't understand that. And there are some that are just out there, and it's more like ones that don't have an actual person talking. Some, that just shows some cartoon graphics or some picture graphics, with the exception of what do we start with? With the exception of reporting from Ukraine, he doesn't show his face, but he's good. And Perun doesn't show his face, but he's very good. So I'm really worried about. Okay, so here, I don't know if War Graphics does that or not, but it's that kind of show. Even though I'm not sure about War Graphics. Ryan Macbeth, I have not watched. Succumus, and I know I'm mispronouncing it. It's like Shukumus or something. It's some kind of dinosaur or something. Does a really good job explaining things. I'm very a big fan of that. Let's see, 1420 does a really good job. Zach the Russian dude does a good job. He's a little glitzy for my taste, but I mean, it is what it is. I mean, he has a different way of doing things. Laser Pig, I've never heard of. I don't know what Laser Pig is, so I can't really tell you. At any rate, it's good to have a good working list of these so that you can see different things in different channels. I shouldn't be doing military map analysis, and I've been told that. I can give you some basic, like, here's what's happening, and I think this might happen, but I can't. And I'm not trying to speak a military language. So, for example, a couple of days ago, I talked about the turning point, but I wasn't talking about in a military term turning point. Somebody, I think it's Stefan, he's from Denmark, said, yeah, in military terms, there's a term that sounds like turning point, and it means when it can't actually happen because there's not enough not enough military resources or something to make that happen. That's not what I was talking about. I was talking about politically, morally. When I say morally, I mean the morale of the issue. The turning point in from a leadership perception was when Zelensky said, "I need ammunition, not a ride," and stayed put. And if he had left, it would have all gone differently. But that he stayed put gave everyone a flagpole to rally around, and that's what I meant by that. Military history. I've seen William Spaniel. I'm not sure. William seems like he's got a very good sense of analysis, but I'm not sure that I fully agree with him. But nonetheless, why can't we find Putler's money? It would help Ukraine rebuild. Wow, that would be a coup, wouldn't it? If they could find Putin's money, and because like he's been grafting from Russia for many years. Joe Bloggs, The Economist. Now there's some that I also don't trust. Trying to remember what his name was, but he's similar to Joe Bloggs, but he's more out there all the time, and he's very confident, and I'm not sure he's right. I'm trying to remember what his name is. Silicon Curtain was really good. Silicon Curtain, and what they're really good at, and their niche is that they really get some great interviews, and so you get great perspective. I was actually talking to him about John. I'm trying to remember his last name. I was talking to him about interviewing him on my channel as well, just to see what he had learned from all of his interviews, which I think would be a fascinating conversation. Yeah, so anything with Ben Hodges. Yeah, if you can find Ben Hodges or Petraeus, there's a number of generals that you can watch that have some amazing perspective. Unlike Colonel McGregor, who just is still predicting Ukraine's over this week, and I can't understand I watch a lot of Colonel McGregor, and I can't understand for the life of me why he takes the position that he does. Scott Ritter's in the same kind of camp, and they both of those continue to maintain that they're realists. Well, if you're a realist, I get how you would have thought that in the first 3 weeks. But when the West started supplying Ukraine and Zelensky didn't flee, the calculus shifted. And so that's what they're seeming to miss, but it's still not coming together. Okay. Yeah, reporting from Ukraine, anything with Ben Hodges. Dissemination or breakdown of the headlines is exactly what's needed because others don't do it. Please don't stop. What you provide is important to the overall understanding. Yeah, but it's so time consuming, and it's so so I see this curve in YouTube that goes like this, right? It goes up for a little bit and then it just flatlines. Like nobody's going back to day 83 and seeing on day 83 this happened, or day 176 this happened. It's not like it just doesn't get any additional traction. So I'm trying to use that same kind of analysis to bigger issues that will help more people understand what's going on. So thank you, ML. But I think shifting gears is the right plan. I don't know that it's turned into any any extra viewers, but that's not the issue. The issue is when they do find it, it allows you to spend your time on something more important than the daily impact. Let me say it like this: if I have one bullet in one gun and I need to eat, and this might not be the greatest analogy because maybe it's not the same thing. I could either shoot a squirrel or I could shoot a larger animal, a moose. If I can shoot a moose, I can eat for a long time. If I shoot the squirrel, that's like the daily what's going on. It's not going to provide nearly as much impact. So I'm looking at how much impact can we provide. Okay. So, okay, I find it hard to watch channels who profess to be neutral. There are values that should be defended. Yeah, and so neutral seems to be a scam of the Russian side to try to influence subtly, and I don't think that there's a lot that's like. What does neutrality mean? You think that it's okay to be neutral and that Russia really is in effect no worse or no better than what Ukraine is? I mean, what? I mean, like something's wrong with your ethical filter if you see that. Ben Hodges is brilliant. Yes, absolutely. Okay, tankies are fascist wannabes, in my opinion. Tankies? Not familiar with that. I'm a Russian troll, and I like McDonald's. Okay, well, I mean, good on you. Andrew Perpetta, I can't speak to. I don't know him. Uh, CT mapping, not familiar with, and TLDR news. I have to go up. You're giving me homework. So I have to go and look at some of these now. Ukraine TBIC, not familiar with, and I'd have to look at Free Kherson. Emma Harden says, going back to a historical look at what happened at the time. Right now, current news is necessary. Yes, I agree. And so I try to pair current news with big items. So, for example, this morning I put out this thing that was talking about what I saw on just a little bit about like who started. I did this thing about the trolls, right? How to spot a Russian troll, because it resonated with me when I watched this Ukraine 24 1-minute clip that talked about how, like, look, you got to go back. Russia violated this agreement and that agreement, this agreement, and this one, and this one, and this one. And then they want to talk about Minsk. And we sat down with 88 rounds of talks about Minsk, but you never hear that from Russian trolls. That's the misery of this. So that resonated with me. It was a timely thing that Ukraine 24 just put out, and I thought, you know what, that's exactly right. Let's talk about this, because that's one of those mooses. Moose. I don't know if it's how you pluralize that. Okay, Terra Ops. Hello, Professor. Hello, Marie. It's nice to see you. CivDiv. What we're talking about is what channels you watch and who's a legitimate, like who's illegitimate, who's on the other side, who should you avoid? Tell me about these. Now, I don't necessarily watch a lot of the avoidable YouTube types. I've seen some that I'm like, I'm not really impressed, because you're kind of all about yourself, or you look like you're into this for the money or whatever else. And by the way, let me also add, because I've heard people talk about this, like, well, Jake Bro's a grifter. No, Jake Bro is trying to make a living by doing something good. And there's a difference between somebody that's just in it for the money, that's trying to tell you what you want to hear, like Ukraine's going to win with this one move, right? Like Jake Bro is not doing that. He's trying to provide you a legitimate service, and in doing that, support himself on that. And that's admirable. There's no problem with that. Okay, so who are the YouTubers to avoid? That's actually a really good question, and it will be helpful to this audience to understand, like, let's get this list out and talk about, let's avoid them, because that's good. I personally read RT and Pravda and stuff like that regularly, and I do that because I want to hear what they have to say on their side. This is state sponsored, but I don't get into the weeds with the YouTubers that to avoid, or on Rumble, those to avoid. I found somebody who was like a evil opposite of me. It was really weird to watch this. He was like, he had very good analysis ability, and he was using it to defend Russian propaganda points. And I was like, wow. I was just like, I like that. I'd like to have a conversation with the guy, but at any rate, so let's look at the list of who you generated. Think tanks often have seminars with excellent perspectives. Atlantic Council, okay, but that's not who to avoid. Hoover Institution is very good. CSIS is good. Okay, Defense Politics Asia is horrible. He's in the Ritter class of morality. Okay, so that's good to know, like who you should avoid. And I would also throw into that, anytime you see Ritter, if you are watching Ritter so that you can hear the other's talking points, or McGregor so that you can hear the other side's talking points, that's a legitimate thing to do. But I would kind of take them with a grain of salt, because they have, like, and McGregor's always talking about, well, I have sources on the ground that showed that 150 Ukrainian tanks were just blown up. I'm making that up, right? But he'll say these like profound things, profoundly huge estimates of like bad things that happen in Ukraine. I don't see anything about that in Western media, and that might be that happened, but I don't know that I trust his sources. And as a professor, I have been trained to have to defend what I'm saying with sources, and so that's how I tend to operate. I feel almost wrong, like I shouldn't say this because because I can't say it, or when I am saying something like that, I go to great lengths to say, this is just me, this is just my own thought. It's not I don't have anything to hang it on, but this is how I see it. So I clarify with that. Okay, let's go back to the list of who's good and who's bad. Jake Bro lives on good moral. Yeah, Jake Bro is doing a good service. And whoever it was that once upon a time was saying like he's a grifter. No, he's not. He's just trying to live and do something good in the process. Avoid Earl Grey. Okay, so here's a good list of things to avoid. So we already started with defense politics. Asia is horrible. Avoid Earl Grey. Stephen Cole said interviews with Justin Bronk of Royal United Services Institute is recommended. Okay, recommended. Let's stay with the avoid. Knucking Futz Yuri, okay, is good. Okay, hold on. Stay with the avoid. Let's see. Marie West said Jake Bro being a teacher being a teacher provides an understanding as he explains things. Yeah, I think he had a financial channel or something before that. That's another interesting facet of this, is that many of us were doing something else on YouTube. Like I was also a best kept secret about leadership stuff. But I had a podcast called the Leader Smith Podcast, and I talked about anything leadership related. And it didn't matter to me if I had 27 people that watched the video, because it was me unpacking thoughts and thinking, and I'd hear myself say things and be like, yeah, that's a really good point. It was almost like therapy, right? Dennis Davdov had a motorcycle channel, and he was like talking about riding his motorcycle around and that kind of thing. Jake Bro was doing that. So a lot of those of us who got into this had been doing something else first, and then it's weird. Like to a man, we all talk about what's his name, a tippling philosopher, Johnny Pierce. Johnny Pierce had a show where he was talking about his philosophy first, and then he and I were talking when we got together and collaborated about how we just didn't want to talk about anything else except for this, because this was really important. And I started with 5 episodes that were on the Leader Smith channel, and these are the biggest hitters, by the way. Is Zelensky a Nazi? No. Here's why. Here's the proof. And I was showing things like, well, he has the what do you call it? The cross, the Iron Cross on his shirt. Well, it's also called the Victoria Cross in Britain. You can't. That's not evidence. At any rate, so you can't you can't just go by something like that. So I shifted gears because I started looking at it and going, I want to talk about what's going on in Ukraine, not just about leadership itself. And then over time, I found that that's more of my niche, is just to stay in that kind of lane rather than try to do everything. Okay. Avoid history legends. Okay, another bad one to stay away from. Voice for Ukraine. I don't know. Is Voice for Ukraine, Ozzy, a good or bad one? I don't remember. I don't know if you were saying that's in the good or bad category. Marie West said, I refuse to watch the opposition. That's fine. I mean, if that's what you want to do, that you can leave that with people like me to see and filter. That's okay. I'm not going to say that you have to. I do think it's an important thing that needs to be done so that you can kind of, and we talked about this earlier about when they kind of made fun of Lavrov. I think it's a good thing to make noodles on the ears. I think it's a good thing to answer a fool according to his folly, lest they be wise. So okay, at any rate, Ozzy, hold on, let's just move down a little bit on me. Voice for Ukraine, refuse to Russia. Okay, the flashback UA, Animarchy history, good. No, but I need a list of bad here. Cheryl Waitley, dang, I missed the beginning. Welcome, Cheryl. Nathalis says, what's your thoughts on how long it will take after the occupied territories got freed for the inhabitants to get over from the Russian propaganda? Wow, that is a tough question. Man, how long will it take for them to get over Russian propaganda? Well, they're doing this to little school children, right? I mean, they're really trying to indoctrinate, and it's almost like what cult. It's very similar to what cults do. I go through these phases. I watch all these documentaries and read all these books about dictators, and then about cults, and then because I'm fascinated by leadership, and even if this is a very negative type of leadership, I'm still fascinated by it. It will take some real unwinding to do that. Okay. What I heard, the occupied areas have mostly only access to the propaganda, especially in Crimea. Yeah, that's right, and they won't allow that. You can generally tell if a country is good or bad by how free they are and how much they allow free press to reign and that kind of thing, where you can get actual information. If you can only get the government's information, that's usually a very bad sign. Uh, Avoid weeb union, WEEB union, okay? Avoid history legends, weeb union, military summary. Well, that's good to know. We should really compile a list of this in the same way. Gap said bad. I hate to even mention them as they should die in darkness. Yeah, I understand, but we want to not go off the rails and see bad stuff. I agree about Weeb. Avoid Renaissance Horizon. Some of these are even new to me. I don't even know some of the names. Avoid NWE War Reports and TCM Clips. Okay, somebody else mentioned TCM Clips earlier, and I didn't know anything about it, but yeah. Cheryl said Jake Bro was in the Air Force for 6 years taking care of the nuclear arsenal. That's right. And so he can speak with some clarity about what's going on with missiles. And I very much appreciate that. And look for experts in whatever their field is, right? Combat Veteran Reacts gives me insight that I just don't have naturally, okay? But maybe I have some insight that he doesn't see as well. So we can all be, piecing this together. Avoid, hold on a second, just popped up on me. Wow, there's a lot of you answering questions. I'm a little bit behind. Give me a second. Avoid New World Economics. Okay, Professor of Leadership, I might have to go back and watch these videos. I love teamwork and leading a team. Go back and watch it. It's Leadersmith, LEADERSMITH, right? And the idea is like I'm helping form and fashion leadership in you. That's the idea behind that name. Leadersmith podcast. Avoid Willy, WWILLYOAM. Okay. I sorted the good channels from the liars over the first 9 months or so of the war. I've forgotten most of the disinfo as I unsubbed months ago from them. Marie West, I'm right. Thank you. I'll take that. Cheryl Whately, Voices for Ukraine is great in my estimation. Roman at the Bakhmut front giving updates. Okay, so let's stay with the negative ones to avoid for now, because we're generating a really good list of things that could be helpful to some people. Voices for Ukraine is good. He translated intercepted communications into English and reveals what the Russians are saying to each other. Yeah, I've seen that kind of stuff done in multiple channels, and that's really some fascinating stuff. I've given up on accurate information from either side. Don't do that. Don't give up on accurate information from either side. The real difficulty for me is not to see like what's going on as the Ukrainians are saying and the West is saying, because you have legitimate sources saying that, but I can't find a opposite legitimate. Like I can find like Moscow Times does a decent job generally speaking, and there are a couple of other sources that are okay-ish at that, and they're trying to present, but there's so much propaganda kind of stuff on the other side that it's really hard to find things that I think I can hang my hat on, but I have to confirm it with the Western sources. That's the real trick. Cheryl Whately, I don't trust Ozzy, okay? Emil Harden, actually by watching all of them, it provides a better perspective and understanding of the Russian frame of mind. It is really yucky. Yeah, it really is. I would agree. Weeb is horrible. Lydia Wade says, it would take a century to reform the Russian citizen. The reality is that they've spent thousands of years under one authoritarian regime or another. Yeah, and there's something very true about that with the authoritarian regimes and what they have done to the psyche. And really, like, you do different things in the authoritarian government than you do in a democracy. You just think differently. Marie West said, I agree, avoid TMC. Cheryl Whately said, is Voice for Ukraine the same as Voices for Ukraine? Voices for Ukraine is good. Leonard Contrast, I love TCM clips. Marie West said, avoid Vice. I'm assuming you're talking about Vice Channel and whatever documentaries they might do. I got in a tangle. Cheryl Whately says, I got in a tangle with Weeb when he was mocking Ukrainian forces. Well, okay, so that's one to avoid. Cheryl Whately, the same. I just got the name slightly wrong. Why Ukraine said, hi, first time making it to a live stream. Hello, Why Ukraine. Thank you for all your helpful comments over time. I've appreciated what you've had to say. Some of you I feel like I know, even though I don't know you. Like ML Harden, I've interacted with quite a bit. Cheryl, I've interacted with quite a bit. Marie, I've interacted, like you're the next three in the line here. ML, New World Economics is Russian learning, although he states the opposite. If you listen to his narration, you begin to understand. Cheryl says, then I don't trust you. Okay, let's not fight, but just let's try to understand what's going on here. Marie West, then when Ukraine is translated, it sure seems like the Ukrainians seem like they're saying way more than the English words we get. Hope that makes sense. Yeah, there is something to that. I think I get that. I'm so glad you're doing this. It's a great idea, but it'll take more than one person. Yeah, I mean, that's true. I can buy that. ML Harden says humorous. Vice is okay in my opinion. And TYVM. What is TYVM? So again, I think we've compiled a really fascinating list of who's good and who should be we should pay attention to, and who are those that we should really just avoid, and maybe we'll turn that into something, some kind of document or something that people can see. But this was a productive effort. Okay, I'm willing to answer any other questions that you have in the next 10 minutes or so, and then we'll be done with today's live stream. So tell me what can I answer for you? Again, asking me about, militarily, is Bakhmut about to fall or whatever? I just don't know enough about it to be able to say it. I mean, I was watching this morning and seeing that Bakhmut's in real desperate straits, and it looks like they might need to tactically retreat, but I can't speak much more to that than that. But what else can I answer for you? So I will give you a couple moments to post anything. I'll answer them, and then we'll be done. Do none of you watch Dennis Davidoff? I mentioned Dennis early on. That was the first one. In fact, Dennis is the guy that got me started. Like, not personally, but watching him, I went, you know what? I already do this kind of thing. Why don't I shift gears and do that? And so that's that. I think Dennis, more than anyone, provoked me into doing my own. At what point of a Russian soldier losses will the Russian public begin to turn? Currently at 153,000, it will be 300,000 or 600,000 or a million dead. Okay, Stephen, that's a brilliant question. And here's the trick. And I saw this, and this was a legitimate source that I got this from, where some polling actually indicated that as more dead soldiers start coming home, Russian resolve is going up, not down, which is actually terrifying to me. But they're actually becoming more patriotic, more whatever, as they start to experience their losses. I understand psychologically how that works. Like, think about Israel and Palestine or something like that. Like, one loss leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, and it just keeps escalating, right? But I think that's the direction that they're going to be going. RFKRZ is good as well. TVP is really good. TVP would BF World BTF is funny. I've never seen those. Operator Starsky, great stuff. Then Dennis Davidoff were my first. What's the justification for the U.S. and allies withholding the need for arms to push Russia out of the Ukraine? Okay, Lydia. So we talked about this very early on in the video, and so you might want to go back to the beginning of that. But I was talking about, like, Biden really had to thread a needle here, holding allies together, not pushing the Russians into World War III or having the pretext for World War III, and trying to supply weapons and incrementally crossing these red lines that they've been talking about. And so I give him high marks for him. I don't like Biden; he's not my guy. But I can still hate what Russia is doing and still domestically not like Biden. It's okay. I mean, again, as a Republican, I ask myself, what would Reagan do? And Reagan would be like, well, how many weapons do you need? What can we do for you? So that's how I filter that. Okay. Next, has Yulia been mentioned yet? Yes, Yulia was mentioned. She's good stuff. She's underviewed. I mean, there's a number of channels that I think are underviewed, but I mean, I have a different perspective of that than maybe some others. Inside Russia, I like Inside Russia. I recognize that some of you don't, but here's the value to Inside Russia. Um, he understands both the Russian. He's like Vlad Vexler, right? He's very much like Vlad in that because he spent this Constantine, because he spent time in the U.S., he understands both a Russian mentality and an American mentality, and so he's able to kind of translate things. He, um, people would condemn him for not doing more than he does. I think what he does is a good service to those of us who are trying to understand this. Zach the Russian. Hold on, I just lost my place here. um, where'd I go? Okay, Zach the Russian. I can't speak to Zach the Russian. I've started watching something and then something interrupted me, and so I'm not all that familiar. Inside Russia is honest, I think. Marie West said, "Are there any hope of getting back the children that Russia has taken? The war crimes against civilians crushes my soul." Zelensky asked Russia what they did to their people to provoke their crimes. Yeah, I think you have to have a legitimate, solid defeat that causes Russia to have to come to the table and say, what is it that we have to do? Without that kind of defeat, you don't get those children back. I think. I can't see it. I could be wrong. I may very well be wrong, but I think that solid defeat gives you the greatest probability or possibility of getting those children back. Jake Bro and Arthur Ray, those are good. With enough time, can Russians still fortify and mine the front enough where it comes to true stalemate and drag it out for years? I think we're going to be talking about this next year. And I know that's not popular. I'm sorry to have to say that, but I think this time next year, we'll still be talking about it. I hope that Ukraine has taken back a lot of ground by that point and that the tide is shifting, but I think it's going to be some time. I don't think we'll be done by the summer. Vlexer is great. Biden isn't really my guy either. And that's fine. He doesn't have to be for you to recognize the evil that is embodied in Putin and his regime and what they're doing to Ukraine. Okay, I'll try this week to brainstorm a good list via the Google Drive link you provided. Okay, the Google Drive link that I provided was I want to create a list, and I've talked about this on the community page, and please go look on the community page. I want to create a crowdsourced list, and we'll translate to Eastern Standard Time, and then we'll use Excel and just the columns in Excel to create the like what that means in your individual times. But we'll translate first to Eastern time zone and then move from there. And so what we'll do is create a list of good, active, like here's who you want to watch. If you want to watch it when the live stream hits, and then we'll publish it somewhere so that people can see it anywhere that they want to see it. But I think that provides a valuable service to other people. Okay, so I'll try to brainstorm. Okay, how do leaders make losses into victories like the British did with Dunkirk? Because they were almost beaten, and everybody knew that they were almost beaten. And to snatch victory out of the jaws of defeat, or at least, so Washington did this, right? Who asked that, by the way? Who fetcha? George Washington wasn't that great of a general. What he did was run a track meet and not get captured by the British. So he understood that if he could just not get captured, the British would have a terrible time controlling a country the size of the United States, 13 colonies, right? And so to not get captured was actually defeating the Russians. It's kind of like Ukraine still being here a year after it looked like they were going to be just wiped out in weeks. That's a victory, right? And you have to think about it in different terms. So I hope that answered your question. The infographic show, Mike Dundee, is that good or bad, or what is that? Ukraine, where'd I go? Why Ukraine said, infographics is okay. If infographics is the one that has lots of, I think I watched one early on, and it was kind of half true and half not true. Like it was, why is Russia invading Ukraine? And they were talking about, well, you have these planes that the opposing force could come right over these planes, and they have these oil deposits and mineral deposits in the sea, and it was helpful, but it really wasn't a complete answer. And this infographic show is, I think, one that is trying to do something for commercial purposes, but it's less about the facts and the heart in it, like Jake Bro, than it is about just getting more views. I could be wrong. Maybe they all really do care. I don't know. Vlad Vexler is awesome. Yes, he is awesome. He's a real academic. You can hear by the things that he says and the way that he measures what he says that he's a real academic. Flexor and Silicon Curtain are fantastic for deep dives. I would also agree with that, Nick. Silicon Curtain deep dives. Russian dude. Why Ukraine said Biden is great compared to Trump. We're not going to get into those political kinds of issues. And please, here, like when you're commenting with each other, if you're all in for Ukraine, you're in the right place. If you're here to bash another politician for something not related to Ukraine, just leave it alone. We're here to support Ukraine. And so what you don't want to do is you don't want to chase out people that are of a different political persuasion than you who might also support Ukraine. Let's just stay with Putin's bad and work on that. Mo Harden. Unfortunately, this is on this topic. You're correct, which is what on Timothy Snyder is excellent. You're probably talking about Trump with Mo Harden. And Trump was not, and he won't be. I don't think. I think he's taken out a position of not being willing to support Ukraine, and that's the political position he's taking. Now there are other Republicans like Nikki Haley, Mike Pence have full-throatedly supported Ukraine. Nikki Haley's running for president. Mike Pence is a potential contender who was Trump's vice president, who was cut out of a very different cloth. And so there's differences even within the party. Always watch out for Peter Zeihan. That's the name I couldn't remember. And Ben Hodges. I feel Ben Hodges should be the next leader of NATO. Well, Ben Hodges is retired, so that's not much of an issue. But Peter Zeihan, he makes me nervous. He's very like confident about what he says, but I don't see. I might be talking out of school because I've not seen enough about him to be able to say this definitively. But he's very confident about what he believes, but I see cracks in his arguments that make me concerned. So I would take him with a little bit of a grain of salt, but I could be wrong. Maybe I just saw poorly argued episodes or something. I don't know. Snyder, I don't know what that means. Snyder, is that good or bad? Ukraine TBIC. Timothy Snyder is a dud. Actually, I think Snyder actually gives some insightful analysis and gives some great historical perspective. He's a volunteer field medic in Donbass, Bakhmut in particular, awesome soul. My first Timothy Snyder book was Bloodlands, Europe Between Hitler and Stalin. Again, he's a legit academician. I think he's at Yale. John Richards, Timothy Snyder published a semester of deep dive in Ukrainian history on YouTube, and I've seen some of those videos. South Carolina Republicans support Ukraine, love your state. Yeah, Lindsey Graham is one of the most full-throated. But again, there's differences within Republicans that are like the old school Republicans as opposed to whatever Trump is as a populist kind of something. So there's differences there. Old Silver, who mentioned Biden Trump, I agree, but I also agree with you here, so I did not mention this. Veniel, I'm going to spell it because I can't pronounce it. YEVHENIIUA is a very small channel doing strong for a year with daily updates, deserves a shout out. Oh, okay, so I got some homework. Cheryl Waitley says, I hope Millie is listening to Hodges. Miley, General, is Mark Miley is listening to Hodges. Silicon Curtain Operator, Starsky, Wiley OAM. I used to think Zeihan was a Chicken Little, but he was calling what Russia was doing, what Russia was going to do years ago. If he's right about China, we're in for interesting times. I hope he's not right about China, and that makes me like. So if you expand the aperture, I think Ukraine might be only a small part of what authoritarians around the world want to actually do, whether it's Ukraine or Ukraine and Iran, or Russia, or Russia and Iran, North Korea, China, whatever. And so that could be some interesting times. But again, Zeihan, there's something about him that makes me nervous. And again, I'm not saying he's bad. I'm just saying he feels suspect to me, and I can only say feels, and I can't hang credible bits of whatever it is on that. I'm just saying, just be careful. Okay, Uh, checking Dana UA now. I'm a Republican who makes John McCain look like a dove. Well, good man. Okay. What what do you guys think about Wiley OAM, and have you all hit that? I'm not sure what that is. Wiley OAM. Real life lore has done some good docs in Ukraine over the past year. That might be what I was thinking about when I was talking about the cartoon. Real life lore is the one. It wasn't the where I was talking about the cartoon and talking about the tanks could come from the west and the oil deposits and all that. I think it was real life lore. Now that I think about it, that they gave a partial explanation, but it didn't go far enough. And again, they're in it to commercialize. They're not in it because they actually care about what's going on. So thank you for mentioning real life lore. Sorry for the late hello from Oblast, Germany. Zihan has made some good points and some incomplete analysis. Yeah, Cheryl, you're saying it right. Um, as stylistically, he's awfully sure of himself. Cheryl nailed it on the head. It's like the analysis. There are gaps in it that make me nervous. But maybe he has made some good points. I just it makes me concerned. Okay. Moxie says hello. How about that English spin, Doctor? Yeah, Ierlaygreey. I don't know who that is. I'm following him, but I can't watch him longer than 45 seconds. Okay. Wiley, as in William, is an Australian veteran who has been to Ukraine. Okay, these are some great points. So what we ought to do is just try to let's do this. I'm going to try to separate these out, and I'll put good column, bad column, and questionable column, and then I'll put it into a community chat later on. And what we'll do is we'll just try to sort that out, and we'll post it and make it available somewhere where people can see this, because I think this is really valuable. Okay. Any last questions? We got like 2 minutes, and then we're going to be done, and I'm trying to answer anything else that I can in the meantime. Okay. And thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all the input and great thoughts. We've really made up some amazing ground here. And I hope that we can turn this into some documents that can be helpful for other people who are trying to find some good information. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, then I'm going to say goodbye and thank you for your time. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine. Have a good one.